11:47 p.m. Rain hammered against the windshield as cars disappeared into the darkness one by one. The parking lot was almost empty now. Except for hers. Her engine was still running. Headlights still on. Driver's door slightly open. But she was gone. Distant police radio chatter. Just 20 minutes earlier. She had been laughing with friends. Answering messages. Making plans for the weekend. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing felt wrong. Then, her phone rang. Witnesses would later say her expression changed immediately. Not fear. Not panic. Something else. Something that made her quietly stand up, grab her keys, and walk away without explaining where she was going. She only said 4 words before leaving. "I'll be right back." She never returned. At 12:06 a.m., her phone suddenly disconnected near a remote stretch of highway nearly 30 miles away. No calls after that. No messages. No activity. Nothing. It was as if she had vanished into the night completely. But investigators would soon discover one detail about that phone call that made the entire case even more disturbing. The number that contacted her should not have been active. According to records, it had belonged to someone who died over a year earlier. And what happened after that phone call would become one of the most unsettling disappearances investigators had ever seen. Before her name appeared across news stations. Before detectives covered entire walls with maps and phone records. Before strangers online began debating what really happened that night. She was simply known as Janet Mark. 24 years old. Quiet. Kind. And almost impossible to dislike. She lived alone in a small apartment just outside the city. The kind of place filled with unfinished coffee cups, sticky notes on the refrigerator, and framed photographs from better days. Every morning, she followed the same routine. Wake up at 6:15 a.m. Coffee before speaking to anyone. Music playing softly while getting ready for work. Always 10 minutes late. Always apologizing for it. Her co-workers would later describe her the exact same way. Responsible. Calm. Careful. The kind of person who texted friends to make sure they got home safely. The kind of person who remembered birthdays nobody else remembered. Nothing about her life suggested danger. Nothing suggested she would suddenly disappear without explanation. She worked as a dental assistant at a small clinic nearly 20 minutes from her apartment. A job she had kept since graduating community college 3 years earlier. It wasn't glamorous. But she loved it. Patients trusted her instantly. Children stopped crying around her. Even during stressful days. People said she somehow made the room feel calmer. Outside work. Her life was simple. Movie nights with friends. Weekend coffee runs. Late-night phone calls with her younger sister. And every Sunday, without fail, dinner at her mother's house. She had plans too. Real plans. Just 3 weeks before she vanished, Janet had started saving money for a move to Chicago. She wanted a fresh start. A larger city. More opportunities. According to friends, she spent hours researching apartments online, sending screenshots, talking excitedly about finally starting over. She sounded hopeful. Happy. Like someone standing at the beginning of a new chapter. But sometime during the final weeks before her disappearance, small things began to change. Tiny things. Easy things to ignore. Co-workers noticed she had become distracted. Not constantly. Just enough to feel unusual. She occasionally stopped mid-conversation, staring down at her phone without responding. Once, during lunch, a friend asked if everything was okay. Janet smiled immediately. Too quickly. Then changed the subject. A few days later, one of her co-workers overheard her arguing quietly outside the clinic parking lot. Nobody heard the full conversation. Only fragments. "Please stop calling me." Followed by silence. Then, "Why would you say that?" When she walked back inside, she looked pale. Shaken. But once again, she insisted everything was fine. And then there were the phone calls. Unknown numbers. Usually late at night. Short conversations. Never longer than a minute or two. Whenever friends asked who was calling, Janet gave different answers. Wrong number. A telemarketer. Just someone from work. But nobody fully believed her. Because each time the phone rang, the same thing happened. Her expression changed. Not dramatically. Not enough to alarm anyone immediately. But enough to leave people uneasy afterward. As though the voice on the other end knew something it shouldn't. Then came the moment investigators would later revisit over. And over. And over again. 3 days before she disappeared, Janet canceled dinner with her mother for the first time in nearly 2 years. No explanation. No apology. Just a short text message saying she was dealing with something. Her mother later told investigators that message didn't sound like her daughter at all. It sounded cold. Detached. Like someone trying very hard not to say too much. Friends noticed something else too. Janet had started locking her phone constantly. Keeping it face down. Taking it everywhere. Even into rooms where she normally left it unattended. At the time, those details felt meaningless. Small. Forgettable. The kind of behavior nobody thinks twice about until it's too late. But investigators would later discover those small changes marked the beginning of something far more disturbing. And at the time, nobody realized those details would soon matter. By the evening of October 14th, nothing appeared unusual on the surface. Janet finished work just after 8 p.m. Co-workers later said she seemed tired, but calmer than she had been in days. Almost relieved. As though something stressful had finally ended. At 8:17 p.m., security cameras captured her leaving the dental clinic alone. Dark jacket. Blue jeans. Coffee cup in one hand. Car keys in the other. Ordinary. Completely ordinary. She stopped briefly at a gas station less than 10 minutes away. Bought bottled water. A pack of gum. And used her debit card at exactly 8:31 p.m. Investigators would later review that footage repeatedly. Not because of what Janet did, but because of what happened behind her. A dark-colored sedan entered the station less than 30 seconds after she arrived. The vehicle never pulled up to a pump. Never parked near the store. It simply sat there, idling near the edge of the lot. Headlights off. The driver was never clearly identified. And strangely, the vehicle disappeared from camera view the exact moment Janet left. At the time, nobody noticed it. But later, detectives would become obsessed with that car. At 8:42 p.m., Janet called her younger sister during the drive home. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. Normal. Mostly. They talked about dinner plans. A movie they wanted to watch that weekend. And Janet's upcoming move to Chicago. Nothing alarming. Nothing emotional. But near the end of the call, her sister noticed something strange. Janet suddenly went quiet. Not fully silent. Just distracted. As though she had noticed something outside the car. Then she said something investigators would later replay endlessly. "Someone's been behind me for a while." Her sister asked what she meant. Janet laughed softly. Nervously. Then immediately tried to dismiss it. "It's probably nothing." But according to phone records, her speed began changing during the conversation. Slowing down. Then speeding up again. As if she was checking whether another vehicle was following her. At 8:51 p.m. the call ended. That was the last confirmed conversation anyone would ever have with Janet Mark. 10 minutes later. Everything changed. At exactly 9:01 p.m. Janet received an incoming call from an unknown number. Investigators later confirmed the call lasted 47 seconds. Nobody knows what was said during those 47 seconds. There was no recording. No voicemail. No witness. Only phone data. And one terrifying detail. Immediately after answering, Janet's vehicle changed direction. Instead of continuing toward her apartment, she turned onto a remote service road nearly 15 miles outside town. A road she had no reason to use. No family there. No friends there. Nothing. The area was isolated. Mostly empty warehouses. Construction lots. And stretches of undeveloped land. Very few streetlights. Very little traffic. And after 10 p.m., almost nobody around. Phone tower data later showed Janet stopped moving for nearly 6 minutes near the far end of that road. Then, her phone suddenly disconnected. Not powered off. Disconnected. As though the signal vanished instantly. At first, nobody panicked. Her friends assumed she had gone home. Co-workers believed she was asleep. Even her mother thought Janet was probably exhausted from work. But sometime after midnight, small concerns began turning into fear. Because nobody could reach her anymore. Calls went straight to voicemail. Text messages remained unanswered. And according to investigators, Janet had never ignored her family for that long before. Never. At 1:12 a.m., one final activity appeared on her phone record. Not a call. Not a text. A location ping. Very brief. Very weak. Near an abandoned industrial property on the outskirts of town. Then, nothing. No movement. No calls. No signal. No Janet. And by sunrise the next morning, the disappearance of Janet Mark had officially begun. By 7:30 the next morning, Janet's family already knew something was wrong. Her phone still went straight to voicemail. Her apartment remained empty. And her car was nowhere to be found. At first, police treated it like a routine missing persons case. An adult woman. No confirmed signs of violence. No witnesses. No immediate evidence of a crime. But that assumption would not last long. At 9:12 a.m., a highway maintenance worker made a discovery nearly 20 miles outside town. A dark sedan. Parked beside an abandoned industrial access road. Engine off. Driver's door slightly open. No one inside. It was Janet's car. And according to investigators, the scene felt wrong immediately. Not chaotic. Not violent. Just abandoned too suddenly. Her purse was still sitting in the passenger seat. Keys missing. Coffee cup still inside the holder. And on the floor beneath the dashboard, investigators found Janet's cell phone. Screen cracked. Battery removed. That detail changed everything. Because detectives later confirmed the battery had not simply fallen out. It had been deliberately taken out. Someone wanted the phone dead. But the strangest detail was discovered moments later. There were no signs Janet had tried to leave. No footprints leading away from the vehicle. No evidence of a struggle nearby. Nothing disturbed in the dirt around the road. It was as if she had vanished directly beside her own car. Then investigators noticed something else. The driver's seat had been pushed unusually far back. Farther than Janet normally positioned it. According to family and co-workers, she was barely 5'4". But investigators estimated the seat position matched someone significantly taller. That meant one of two things. Either someone else had been inside the vehicle after Janet disappeared, or someone had driven the car there. Crime scene technicians searched the sedan for fingerprints. And initially, they believed they had found a breakthrough. Several partial prints were recovered near the steering wheel and along the passenger side door. But within days, most of those prints were identified as belonging to co-workers, family members, mechanics, gas station employees. Everyone except the person investigators actually wanted. Then came the discovery that unsettled detectives the most. A single strand of long hair was recovered from the back seat. Not Janet's. At least, not according to the first forensic report. For several days, investigators quietly explored the possibility that another woman had been inside the vehicle shortly before Janet vanished. But before they could fully investigate that lead, the lab suddenly revised the report. The sample was too degraded for confirmation. And just like that, another lead disappeared. Meanwhile, detectives began reconstructing Janet's final movements minute by minute. The gas station footage, the phone records, the service road, the final 47-second call. Every path led back to the same question. Who contacted Janet that night? But investigators soon discovered something deeply frustrating. The number used during the final call did not belong to a registered individual. It was connected to a prepaid mobile account purchased with false information weeks earlier. No real name. No address. No usable trail. And then, the investigation took another turn. Detectives learned Janet had recently filed 2 separate police complaints involving suspicious activity near her apartment complex. The reports were brief, easy to overlook. But now, they suddenly felt important. According to those reports, Janet believed someone had been watching her. One incident involved a vehicle parked outside her apartment for nearly 3 consecutive nights. Same location. Same hours. Never identified. Another report described repeated late-night phone calls where nobody spoke after she answered. Only breathing. Then silence. At the time, officers reportedly advised her to document future incidents if they continued. But Janet never filed another report. Because less than 2 weeks later, she disappeared. Then investigators uncovered the detail that would push the case into national headlines. A witness had possibly seen Janet alive, hours after police believed she vanished. And what that witness described would change the direction of the entire investigation. 3 days after Janet disappeared, investigators received a phone call that changed the case again. A truck driver traveling through the industrial district the night Janet vanished claimed he may have seen her. According to his statement, around 1:40 a.m., he noticed a young woman standing near the side of an isolated access road. Alone. Wearing dark clothing. Looking frightened. At first, he assumed her vehicle had broken down. But one detail stayed with him afterward. The woman kept looking behind her. as though she was expecting someone to appear from the darkness. The driver told investigators he slowed down briefly. And for a moment, their eyes met. He later described her expression as terrified, but trying not to show it. Then he noticed something else. A second vehicle parked farther down the road. Dark-colored. Headlights off. Almost completely hidden from view. The truck driver became uneasy immediately. He considered stopping. But according to investigators, the woman suddenly shook her head slightly, as if silently telling him not to. So he drove away. For years afterward, the witness reportedly blamed himself for that decision. Because less than 20 minutes later, Janet's phone signal disappeared forever. Detectives spent weeks trying to identify the second vehicle. But the witness could only describe fragments. Dark sedan. Older model. Possibly damaged rear bumper. No license plate remembered. No clear driver description. Almost nothing useful. Still, investigators believed the sighting was credible. Because the timeline matched Janet's final phone activity almost perfectly. And more importantly, the witness correctly described clothing details never released publicly. That meant one terrifying possibility suddenly became unavoidable. Janet may still have been alive. Hours after police originally believed she disappeared. And if that was true, then somebody had been with her out there, waiting in the dark. But investigators still had no names. No suspect. No explanation for the phone calls. Only fragments. And the deeper they looked into Janet's final weeks, the stranger the case became. Nearly 6 weeks into the investigation, detectives finally identified someone connected to Janet's final days. And according to case files, his name had already appeared before. 32-year-old Daniel Mercer, a former security contractor who had briefly worked near Janet's apartment complex months earlier. At first, his connection to Janet seemed minor, almost insignificant. But investigators quickly noticed disturbing patterns. Phone records revealed Mercer had contacted Janet multiple times in the weeks before her disappearance. Not through registered numbers. Prepaid phones. Disposable accounts. Difficult to trace. Even more alarming, witnesses later claimed Janet appeared uncomfortable around him. One coworker remembered seeing a man matching Mercer's description waiting outside the clinic parking lot days before Janet vanished. Another neighbor reported seeing a dark sedan parked outside Janet's apartment late at night several times that month. The description closely matched the witness account from the industrial road. Detectives soon learned Mercer also had a troubling history involving harassment complaints from previous relationships. No violent convictions. No prison record. But multiple reports described obsessive behavior. Repeated unwanted contact. Late-night appearances near victims' homes. Patterns investigators could no longer ignore. Then came the discovery that pushed Mercer to the center of the case. Investigators obtained security footage from a hardware store recorded 2 days before Janet disappeared. The footage allegedly showed Mercer purchasing work gloves, duct tape, heavy plastic sheeting. Items detectives considered deeply concerning given the circumstances. But despite growing suspicion, there was still a major problem. No direct evidence placed Mercer with Janet the night she vanished. No fingerprints inside the vehicle. No confirmed eyewitness identification. Nothing prosecutors believed could guarantee charges. And then, just as investigators prepared to question Mercer formally, he disappeared. Without warning. Without explanation. His apartment sat untouched for days. Neighbors reported not seeing him. His prepaid phone suddenly became inactive. And according to investigators, Even his bank activities stopped completely. For the first time, detectives openly considered the possibility that Janet's disappearance had been planned long before that final phone call. But before investigators could locate Mercer, another discovery would shift the case in an entirely different direction. 2 months after Janet disappeared, investigators made a discovery deep inside a wooded area nearly 40 miles from the industrial road. A hunter reported finding torn fabric partially buried beneath wet leaves. Detectives arrived shortly afterward, and within hours, the search area expanded dramatically. Among the debris, investigators recovered a damaged necklace identified as Janet's, fragments of clothing, and personal items exposed by recent rainfall. But the discovery that shocked investigators most was located farther inside the woods. Human remains, badly decomposed, hidden beneath loose soil and branches. Forensic teams spent days processing the scene. And although environmental damage complicated the investigation, official identification eventually confirmed the remains belonged to Janet Mark. The medical examiner could not determine an exact cause of death, but investigators publicly stated the scene strongly suggested foul play. News coverage exploded nationwide. And almost immediately, attention returned to Daniel Mercer. But by then, Mercer was still missing. No confirmed sightings. No arrests. Nothing. Then investigators released one final detail to the public. Near the burial site, detectives discovered tire impressions matching the general pattern of Mercer's sedan. Not enough for certainty, but enough to deepen suspicion. And despite years of investigation, one question still remains unanswered. What exactly happened during those final 47 seconds on the phone with Janet Mark? Years later, the disappearance and murder of Janet Mark remains one of the most disturbing unsolved cases in the region. Daniel Mercer was never officially charged. And despite multiple nationwide searches, he was never found. Some investigators believe he died while fleeing. Others believe he carefully planned his disappearance long before Janet vanished. Over the years, new tips continue to surface. Possible sightings, anonymous phone calls, unverified witness statements. But none led to answers. Janet's family still speaks publicly about the case, still hoping someone, somewhere, knows what happened that night. And investigators remain haunted by the same detail that started everything. One phone call, 47 seconds, and a decision Janet made that changed her life forever. Because somewhere within those missing moments may be the truth behind her disappearance. A truth that, even after all these years, has never fully been uncovered. And perhaps the most terrifying part of all is that whoever was waiting for Janet that night may have never been caught. Investigators still receive occasional tips about Janet Mark's case even today. Most lead nowhere. But detectives continue hoping that one person, one overlooked witness, or one forgotten detail could finally explain what happened after that phone call. Because for Janet's family, the questions never truly ended. Only the silence did. What do you think happened to Janet Mark that night? Was Daniel Mercer truly responsible? Or was somebody else involved the entire time? Leave your theory in the comments below. And if you enjoy detailed true crime documentaries like this, subscribe for more real cases every week. Because sometimes, the most terrifying mysteries are the ones that still remain unsolved.